Hello, my friends. Long time no see. Today, I want to focus on one issue that has been brought up in the whole climate hysteria that's been going on, and that is the question of diet. There are obvious shills like Greta Thunberg .
No one is acting as if we were in a crisis. Even most climate scientists or green politicians keep on flying around the world, eating meat and dairy.
And Bill Gates, who have been promoting a meatless diet.
The problem, bovine flatulences. Do you want to explain what that is and why it's a problem?
Yeah, so the animals that can eat grass have very unusual stomachs that have these bacteria that are methanogenic in there. And so they leak natural gas, both out the front and the back. And so people have said, well, let's change the hay or throw some things in there. And nobody knows how to get rid of
No one knows how to get cows to stop farting.
Exactly, or burping. And so there is artificial meat, but that's at a very early stage. But that's another big source of greenhouse gas emissions. So, I'm just trying to make sure that the people who acknowledge the problem, which I think is fantastic, that they understand the breadth of innovation required before you can get anywhere near to what we have to do, which is zero. If it was a 50% reduction, then you could ignore, okay, leave the cows alone. But because we're trying to avoid the temperature continuing to go up, you do need to go to zero. Otherwise, you're continuing to have temperature increase.
To save the environment. And I don't think that's the actual reason why a meatless diet is being promoted. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to go way out on a limb and speculate that the elites promote vegetarianism because it makes people docile. Oh, just real quick, for evidence that the vegetarian diet does make you docile, I forgot to mention in the video that I wanted to include this clip of a TED Talk where this guy talks about how he switched to a plant-based diet and how it made him less aggressive, less angry, more compassionate and loving. So just watch that.
I've sat across from and interviewed nearly 100 people on my podcast that have transitioned from a predominantly animal-based diet or a standard American diet to a plant-based diet. And almost all of them speak of some similar experience, some newfound sense of calm and ease within them. I've come to believe that when you align your daily actions with the human values you already have inside of you, this phenomenon occurs. What I mean by human values is that deep down, all of us are loving and compassionate beings. I believe that when you eat an animal, a once living, breathing, feeling creature, that you take on its energy. There's a scientific theory dating back to the 1940s that has been popularized by the likes of Deepak Chopra and others called cellular memory, and that our memories and experiences exist at a cellular level, not just in the brain, and are able to live beyond the life of a being. So when you eat a cow, for example, when you eat a burger, a steak, you are in fact eating a cow that's life looks something like when it was born, ripped from her mother. She was then fed so much until she got so fat she could barely move. She was raped and impregnated. Her baby, her calf, was then ripped from her at birth. She was milked for all she was worth, and the process repeats over and over and over. She spends her entire life in an enclosure no bigger than this circle I'm standing on. Ultimately, when she's no longer of value, she's hung upside down by her hind legs and slit at the throat. We then eat that animal. And to think that that fear, that anxiety, that stress, that pain, that anger, that dis-ease has no impact on our health and how we treat others is simply ludicrous. If you told me 4 years ago I'd be standing up here talking with you about things like love and compassion, not only for myself and in my health, but for other humans and even animals, I would have laughed you out of the damn room. Yet here I am, and it started with a change I decided to make to my plate. And I stand here today a better man in every sense of the word. A better friend, a better family member, a better boyfriend. So the next time you sit down to a meal, I encourage you all to just take a minute and think about what you're taking from the outside world and putting inside of your body, because it is the single greatest decision we make daily. And know that what you're about to eat not only impacts your health, but it has a profound impact on your ability to love and care for the people in your life. Thank you.
It makes people a little stupid. Your brain needs meat. It makes people weak as well. There is archaeological evidence, and I learned this in Evolution Class 101 last semester. There's archaeological evidence, or would it be considered paleontological, or would it be considered anthropological? I don't know, I'm not a scholar. But there's evidence. They've dug up bones out of the ground and done analyses on these bones. And by analyzing the chemical composition of these bones, you can get a good idea of what the diet of these people was. And it turns out that when we look at the bones of early humans and compare the bone structure of hunter-gatherer tribes to the bone structures of agriculturalist tribes, it becomes extremely obvious that the hunter-gatherers were bigger, stronger, their bones were harder, their teeth were more intact. And I mean, this is just well-known, established science. I'm not telling you anything controversial here. So, and the addition of meat into the diet is also, I've heard, this might not be true, but it's been theorized that the addition of meat into the diet caused the brain to grow, because the brain is like mostly fat and cholesterol, and it requires vitamin B vitamins that are only in meat, requires all kinds of stuff that really is only found in significant quantities in meat. So we need meat. A vegetarian diet makes people weak, a little stupid, and docile. And I think that this is the reason why it is being promoted so heavily lately. And this whole stop eating meat for the environment is just their latest trick, their latest excuse to get the public to go vegetarian. But there is a long history to elite factions, at least certain groups of well-connected elites, that have promoted vegetarianism. And it goes all the way back to Plato and Pythagoras. But even more recently, you look at people like Kellogg, who was a Seventh-day Adventist, a big-time Judeo-Christian cult, and they required vegetarianism, and he was the one who got the public to start eating cornflakes for breakfast. And back then, it was sold to the public in the name of health. It was healthier. And that's still happening today. That's still one of the excuses that they use today. And interestingly, I'll link a video in the description. There's a pretty interesting video of this woman that goes through a list of cults, like Jim Jones's cult. I think that was the one at Jonestown. He required vegetarianism. Seventh-day Adventists require vegetarianism. There's a whole bunch of cults that required vegetarianism of their followers. And it's because it makes you weak, a little stupid, and docile, easy to control. And I think going all the way back to, like I said, Plato and Pythagoras, who, by the way, the elite Western academic institutions like Yale believe that they are in the tradition of Plato. So the academic establishment, which we know is controlled by the financial establishment, which we know is controlled by international occultists, Judeo-occult elites, they believe that they are in the tradition of Plato. Here's a clip from a Yale lecture.
The Republic, like the Greek polis, was a kind of tutelary association. And its principal good, its principal goal, was the education of citizens for positions of public leadership and high political responsibilities. It is always worthwhile to remember that Plato was above all a teacher. He was the founder of the first university, the Academy, the Platonic Academy, where we will find out later Aristotle came to study, among many others, Aristotle being but the most famous. Plato was the founder of this school. And this, in turn, spawned other philosophical schools throughout the Greek world and later the Roman world. With the demise of Rome in the early Christian centuries, these philosophical academies, these philosophical schools were absorbed into the medieval monasteries, and these in turn became the basis of the first European universities in places like Bologna, Paris, Oxford. These were in turn later transplanted to the New World and established in towns like Cambridge and, of course, New Haven. We can say today that this university is a direct ancestor of the Platonic Republic, of Plato's Academy. We are all here the heirs of Plato. Think of that. Without Plato, no Yale. We would not be here today. And I think that is a fact. I'll let you just ponder that for a moment.
So they think that they would not exist without Plato, and this is true in all the philosophy classes that I've ever taken. I'm in my last semester. I'm about to get my undergraduate degree in philosophy. I've taken a great many philosophy classes, and Plato is the guy. He is the father of Western philosophy. And Plato was a totalitarian. He wanted to control every last aspect of life, to the point where he wanted to take children away from their parents at birth, so that parents would never know which child was theirs. He had a whole system to make sure that the parents would never know which child was theirs. He would make sure that sex was only done on certain festival days, so that babies would all be born in batches, so you wouldn't know based on age who your child was. And matches would be made by a secretly arranged lot. But the people would believe that it was just a random sort of lottery. But behind the scenes, Plato says, the matches would be made by the philosopher kings. And he wanted to control what kind of music people listened to, what kind of stories they heard. He wanted to ban a lot of Homer. He wanted to censor a lot of Homer. Every single aspect of life was to be controlled in Plato's ideal utopia, his republic. And one aspect of that is diet. And he talks about this in the Republic, where he says that eating meat would cause conflicts, would cause people to become aggressive and fight over pasturage. So back then, the excuse was, oh, people would get jealous over each other's pastures and fight over the land because they need more land, and they'd get into conflicts over the pastures. But I think that even then was just another surface level excuse for the real reason, which was to control people, to make them easier to control. So Plato recommended a meatless diet. And it goes even as far back as Pythagoras, who created a utopian colony at Croton, where he required his acolytes, his disciples, to be vegetarian. And his reasoning was that people's souls lived on in animals, so you weren't supposed to eat an animal because you might be eating the soul of a dead relative or a dead friend or this or that. But once again, I do think that it was about control, because Plato, one of his biggest influences was Pythagoras. And I think that these philosophies are connected in a holistic way. And if Plato was heavily influenced by Pythagoras, and Plato was a totalitarian and wanted to control every single aspect of people's lives, then I think it's reasonable to assume that Pythagoras was the same way, and that the life of one of his acolytes at the Pythagorean colony would have been heavily regimented, heavily restricted, and controlled by either Pythagoras or one of his, chief lieutenants. So, yeah, I think it's just interesting that the newest excuse to promote vegetarianism is to save the environment. They're really going out on a limb with that. But what can you do? I mean, the public they seem to be eating it up. I mean, the public seems ready to eat stuff like the Impossible Burger or the Impossible Patty of whatever the fuck other meat patties there are that it's being served in popular fast food restaurants. If people weren't eating it, they wouldn't be selling it, I don't think. So people are ready to start eating this shit, this veggie burger, this maggot burgers, which isn't really strictly vegetarianism, but it's still meatless. These artificial meats that they're growing in labs. There's tons of money that is being poured into this whole idea of living a meat-free life. And like I've already said, I think I've made my point. I think if you look at the history of who promotes vegetarianism the most, And especially look at the science of the physiology of it, of what your body needs for your brain to be working at its optimal function, for your muscles to be working at their optimal functioning. And what a plant-based diet lacks. Because it's really obvious. It takes 2 seconds of common sense. Look at the fossil record. Look at the fossilized remains of early hunter-gatherers versus early agriculturalists. The agriculturalists were puny. They had bad teeth. Their bones were brittle. So, just another aspect of the elite control mechanism, all the mechanisms that they use to control people. Just one other one to make it easier. So, anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate it if you're still here. I know I haven't made many videos lately, but I've said this before. I'm never going to quit making videos. If I get a good idea, then I'll make a video. But lately I've been very busy with school. Maybe I'll make a video on some of the shit that's been going on in my classes. Lots of anti-white stuff. Lots of highly progressive globalist stuff being pushed on us. And in classes that you wouldn't really expect it. Like, one of them is an academic writing class where we're supposed to be learning how to just write academic papers. Very general, it's an English class. It's supposed to be very general. But all of the papers that we've read as examples have been highly progressive, highly anti-white, highly pro-immigrant, highly globalist, interconnected world, we're all one kind of thing. And even in my German class, the last theme that we learned was about climate change. The whole chapter was about climate change. So it's everywhere, and yeah, it's pretty bad. But I'd like to make more videos lately. I'd like to make more videos in the near future. So I hope you stick with me, and I hope you keep looking for notifications, because they are forthcoming. And I need to make a big video on Plato, because I really do think, as I said a bit in this video, that Plato is the guy. He's where it all began. So, thank you for watching.